Right. Okay. I believe we are recording. I'm just going to leave it 2 seconds just in case. Okay, so Dark Bleatings, everybody. Welcome back to another author interview. I'm really excited to have SQ McGrath with me today, who, if you follow any of my content on any platform, you will definitely have heard me talking about, especially this book, The Women in the Woods, that I have been raving about since I read it in May. So welcome, Sarah, and thanks for being here. How's it going?
It's going okay. It's going well. Yes, thank you.
Great. So, so SQ McGrath is the author of several novels, a lot of which I purchased immediately after reading this, and this was my first book by you, and I loved it so much that it just immediately convinced me to try and buy everything that you've released, and I'm making my way through your back catalogue now. So yeah, if we could start by talking about this, because this as a topic will be a surprise to absolutely no one, but follows my channel or reads anything on my website. So The Women in the Woods, how to describe this? We have our main character, Min, who is lost. They've got a bit off, she and her son have got a little bit off the beaten path. They're lost in the woods and they happen upon a commune of sorts. And then also we've got Min's backstory as well. We're dipping in and out of an event from her past. And yeah, can you talk a little bit about constructing those sort of like dual storylines? Because it was really interesting, because I was very scared in the past segments, even though I knew it must have been okay because we were also in her presence. So that creeped me out because I didn't know where it was going. So without spoilers, because I would like everyone to read this, yeah, can you talk a little bit about juggling those two sections?
Sure. I had to take my brain back a little bit because it's been a while since I've written that book. It hasn't been that long, but I've written a couple things since. So I had to kind of work backwards a little bit. And I'm a pantser, right? So we talk about plotters and pantsers. And I did not start out that book knowing where it was going to go.
Oh.
At all. So I never know where my books are going to go. So it's funny because when I was writing it, I was nervous too. I thought, oh no, where's this going? What's going to happen? Or, I didn't know. And it is kind of hard to talk about the book because I don't want to give spoilers. And it's so intertwined that I don't want to accidentally say something. But I know that when I started the book, I had two interests and I didn't really know what to do with them. So I just decided to put them together. So I wanted to write a folk horror, right, which is obvious. And then I'm kind of obsessed with the Satanic Panic.
Yeah.
So, and the West Memphis 3 case, I don't know how much you know about that, but I was really into it. I just listened to a huge podcast about it. I'd watched the documentary, Paradise Lost. And so I wanted to pull in my interest in all that with Min's past story and what's going on with Isaac. So I had these two very separate interests. And I just thought, I'm just going to stick them together in a book. And they started out very separate. And I thought, I know I have to work them together somehow. And so as I wrote, I just kind of found a way to sort of, I don't know, it was like uncovering the mystery myself as I wrote it and just finding these little, that can work. And, I'm going to do this and that. And I did have to sometimes go back and change little bits and pieces, but it was fun. It was like uncovering the mystery myself as I was writing it. So it was a process, but I really enjoyed it. And actually I wrote that one pretty fast. It just kind of came. So
Yeah, it's really, really immersive, because obviously what's happening in the present, you've put us right in a dilemma to start with. And I think that anyone who isn't a seasoned hiker or camper, or someone who's prepared to go off the trail and not really know where they are, like that's just a scary idea for anyone. And then also, yeah, if you're with your son and you're the person, like, you have to be the most adulty adult in that scenario. So like being the one who like has to solve that problem as well. I felt stressed for her reading it, and then these like past sections with every like revelation that was happening in her past, I was like, what? But what is this to do with the main story? And I was so, and
Yeah.
I think maybe it's because I studied script writing, so I had a lot of classes on like story construction and stuff. So when which has ruined watching most movies for me because now
Um,
I see the setup now. Unless it's a really good film, and in that case, it's set up, but I didn't notice it as a glaring setup. And I thought you really pulled it off here because I was really busy trying to figure out how these things married together, and I feel like when when um when everything does become clear in the third act, I felt like, oh man, I should have caught it, but I didn't because you were like the
glad.
master of like, whoa, look over here at this other thing I'm doing, and the actual horror elements in the third act as well. That's something I've also talked about in my reviews because it is I wouldn't say like it's a nice little folk horror because it's like the subject matter is quite heavy and there's a lot going on. But I wasn't expecting the complete chaos of the I was saying like people who like Midsummer would really dig this because it like all of a sudden it gets very, very violent. And yeah, how do you feel when you're constructing scenes like that? Because the imagery for the stuff that's going on was so horrific. I was yeah, I was cackling like a little witch because I was so delighted when I got to it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad about some of the surprises, by the way, because a lot of times when I write twists, I'll think, oh, is that too obvious? I don't know, because I don't know until someone reads it and then says, oh, that was so, I saw that
Mhm.
comment, or, I didn't. So I'm glad that I had some surprises in there for you. But I think I knew it needed to ramp up at the end, because it'd been relatively, little creepy things here and there, but it needed to just kind of,
Mhm.
I don't remember the scenes being like super, super brutal. Um, I don't know. When it comes to gore in my writing, I think I'm more nuanced.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I don't actually read a ton of horror, but I know there are genres out there like splatterpunk and stuff where it's like, I don't think that's me. So when it comes to the to body horror and all that, I do think that I insinuate more than I am really
Mhm.
obvious about stuff. So like I don't want to give anything away, but um, so some of that stuff that does happen in the end, I don't know, and you could say answer this better than I could because you've read a lot more in the genre, but um, I I don't know. I didn't think when I was writing it that it was incredibly grotesque or anything. Maybe implied grotesqueness.
Mhm.
I don't know. Was it?
Yeah.
It's not like you were throwing up in the back of your mouth or something, right?
No, so for me as a reader, I don't know where my line actually is for like gore and like those really outright scenes of like body horror or blood or anything, but I don't read extreme horror as a general rule because that's way too much for me. And on the human suffering scale, I just don't enjoy those books much. But I do like authors like Clive Barker who are very visceral with how they use things like that. And I felt like you straddled like a really good line because it was so the horror isn't like I say the horror, the physical horror towards the end isn't like the craziest thing I've ever read, but it as a counterbalance to like the slow burn of the rest of the
Mhm.
book, it worked really, really like it really was such a satisfying payoff because I read a lot of books that I think are a slow burn book, but then there isn't like a huge thing at the end, and I oh, it's not really a slow burn then, it was just slow. Whereas this, it, like fizzles along at a very nice pace, and then yeah, it really pays off in the
It
end.
needs to ignite at some point, right? Like needs to,
Yeah,
yeah,
yes, I was
yeah.
not disappointed. I was, and
Oh, good.
I very rarely I read so much and I enjoy a lot of books, but I very rarely am like really excited by a book like I was with this one. It doesn't happen very often. I have like my favorite authors. I always enjoy their books. So if I find a new author where I'm like, oh my God, look at that book. Yeah, and I didn't know if this was going to be like a fluke for me. Not in a disrespectful way to you, but also that
Okay.
happened. But
I
then
didn't
I
know
read
either.
but then I read Hilltop House, which I loved. I am a huge folk horror fan, so this is my favorite of the two of these, but I loved this one almost as much for what you did with this. And I was like, oh, okay, no, she's legit. Like she knows
Oh, thank
she knows
you.
how to tell a horror story. Um, this book, I don't want to spoil this for anyone else, but very early on, it's apparent that there are several viewpoints, and one of the viewpoints is of the house that this is set in. And it was really, in a dark way, it was very amusing when we were in the POV of the house, because the further into the book you go, the more neurotic the house is getting. And I loved the way that you depicted that with like physical things about the house, like a crack appears in a wall when the house starts feeling like a little bit unhinged. And yeah, I hate saying like where did you get the idea for a particular story, but what was it about this viewpoint that interested you, that so that you wanted to write from it?
Well, that was actually the first horror novel I wrote. I think I'd written some young adult stuff that was a little bit, spooky, but this was the first one. And I knew I wanted to do something with a house, a haunted house, but I knew it couldn't be a typical haunted house. It needed something different.
Hmm.
And I I had some strange ideas that didn't really work. And this is going to sound strange, but do you know the children's movie Monster House?
Yeah,
Have you seen that? I
yeah.
had that in my mind. I kept thinking I liked how the house itself was kind of alive. And so I wanted to do something like that. But then the end of Monster House, it's like it's the spirit of a dead person. So I didn't want that. So I just kind of separated the two. I'm like, I want a live and a living house, but not the spirit of a dead person. Like I didn't want it to be connected to a person. So I just kind of disconnected it and went with that. So I don't
Mhm.
know. I thought that was kind of different. And that's
Yeah,
where it went.
it was a really interesting read, because whenever so ghost stories, I always say this, but then when I find a good ghost story, I really enjoy it. But as a general rule, I don't feel drawn to haunted house stories or haunted place stories very much, because um I do like a gothic atmosphere, but I do find that haunted house stories tend to be a bit samey, in that there's a ghost and everyone is scared of the ghost, or maybe they don't believe in the ghost at first, and then stuff happens. So
Right, right.
this one was very much more like the house itself is a malevolent presence, and because
Mhm.
we were in the viewpoint of the house as well, I just wasn't. And because the house, because like you personified this building so well that it reads like the average person who's, going slightly off the rails. So it was very unpredictable. Like I didn't know what the house was going to do. So
Yeah. It's like a stalker, but who can't physically stalk you. So what is it going to do? you
yeah,
know,
yeah, and also, the people living inside the house aren't going to immediately suspect that there's anything amiss, that because there's no, it's not like they're gonna, suddenly see something in a corner necessarily, because it's the house itself. So yeah, I just thought that was such. I have read a couple of stories that are from like the building's perspective, like two short stories that I can think of, but I've never got to enjoy that for a full length novel before. So those are my favorite chapters, when we like I loved it all, but yeah, when we were going into the POV of the house, I was like, oh, what's
what's
it
it
doing
thinking?
now?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad. The house is my favorite to write from. I thought I could get kind of weird with it, So I was like, let me just
Yeah.
get weird. What would a house think? And then I knew it would sound kind of like sexual in nature a lot of the time, but I just kind of went with it. At first I was like, is this too weird? And then I thought, I'm just gonna go with it. So maybe it didn't come off that way to you, but that's when I'd be writing it, I'd think, oh, this kind of, oh well, I'm just gonna go with it. So,
Yeah,
but
it's I suppose that's interesting, because you never know how something you're writing is going to be received.
mhm.
I realized was I wrote a like a comedy horror a zombie sitcom play is how I was describing it, and I didn't realize so it all looked a certain way in my head, and then I got to be there when a cast was putting it together with a director, and I was sitting in rehearsals, and it looked so different to how I imagined it.
Oh,
And like the things that they were taking from some of the lines and everything, I was like, oh, that's not quite actually what I meant, but this is even better. So that was a fun learning curve for me about how like once you've unleashed your stories into the world, they could be taken all number of ways. I did get like a maybe like a slightly sexual sort of like undertone, but not it wasn't like the overriding thing. It felt more like a infatuation
okay.
to
Well,
me.
good. Because I mean, I wasn't necessarily going for that. It's just sometimes I'd think, is this too weird? Oh well, whatever.
Yeah.
What is it?
What
Okay. Well,
kind
good.
what kind of stories do you enjoy as a viewer or reader?
You know, I'm I don't really read a lot of horror.
Mhm,
I'm trying to read more indie horror to support the community. I want to support my fellow writers,
mhm.
um, because I think that's important. But I don't really read a lot of horror. I read a lot of, it's gonna sound so stuck up, but I read a lot of like classic literature. But I'm an English teacher, so I've been teaching ELA for 20 years, and I teach high school teenagers. And so a lot of what I read is like Greek plays and epics and the Russian novels, and
Mhm.
Dante is my favorite. But I was doing a podcast a couple weeks ago with a writer friend, and I was he asked me the same question, and I said, even when I think about what interests me as far as classic literature, it's always the dark stuff. Like I think of Dante, I love the Inferno. I don't care about Paradise and Purgatory.
I'm the
Grimm's fairy
same.
tales, I want the ones about cannibalism and incest. I don't care about the happy endings. So
Yeah.
even all the classic lit, it's always the dark stuff that gets me.
Mhm.
So if I'm reading, it's usually those kinds of things. I've tried to read more contemporary lit, and again, a lot of indie authors this summer and this past year.
Mhm.
So, including your work, which was so fun.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
yeah, no, it was so fun. Really well written, and
Well, thank you.
as I'm sure can't say that for a lot of our, But anyway, I don't want to be negative. But anyway, so that is what I'm trying to read in my free time, especially over the summer when I have time.
Yeah.
When I go back to work, it's going to be all work reading again. So
Yeah, I've been making more of an effort to read classics. Classic horrors, admittedly, I haven't veered much out of the genre, but it's where a lot of our contemporary stuff, whether it's horror or not, comes from. And I think a lot of the best writers read more widely than the genre that they write in. Um, yeah, I went on a bit of a spree with the classics, and that was where I started reading more ghosts actually, because there's a lot of ghosts in classic horror lit.
oh, right, right.
But
Yeah, and I haven't even read a lot of classic horror. I mean, I've done Dracula, Frankenstein, and Jekyll and Hyde, a lot of the gothic fiction I've read. Um, yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I need to read more contemporary lit. So I've had a lot of people recommend Stephen King. Obviously, I know I've never read a Stephen King book, so I'm terrible. I I will amend this, I promise, but I'm going
That's
to.
okay. Stephen's not for everyone, but it's very rare that you hear someone say that they haven't read any Stephen King because he's been going for such a long time. But I
I
don't
read a
even
short story. I teach the jaunt. I do teach that one with my students.
yeah.
So there you go.
I I like that word. I don't even know where to start recommending Stephen King to people anymore because he's written such a huge body of work. I'm like, I really don't know. I don't know. um, so in terms of your writing, um, what do you have sort of like common themes or like emotional states that you like to work within for your characters, like rather than specific subgenres?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to think about because I just kind of write, and
Mhm.
I don't usually sit back and say, "Oh, what are the things that I tend to write about? What are my themes?" But I've had to think about it a little bit, just when people have asked me. Um, and I think when I started writing horror, I was like, "Oh, I want to write a haunted house story. I want to write a folk horror. I want to try a cosmic horror." I just kind of was like, "Let me go through the genres and see what I can do," and just kind of challenged myself. But if I think about my horror, one of the things I tend to write a lot about, I think, is actually like shame.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a genre for shame horror, but like the things that are past or in our psyches that we're embarrassed about or afraid to talk about, or we don't want other people to know about us. And I realize that I often work shame and secrets and things we don't want other people to know. Like I kind of build off of that and try to make the monsters or the horror in regards to those feelings metaphorical as well as literal, I guess, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. I don't know. And probably the one I do that the most in is Dark Heart and Kitty, actually, the two that we really haven't talked about, which is fine. But those two deal a lot with like shame and regret. Um,
Yes,
so,
that segues me nicely because I do have those, but I stupidly put them in the stack of things I propped my laptop up with, so I don't want to pull them out right now.
that's
But
okay.
Darkheart and Kitty, I wanted to move on to because just going back to earlier when you said you're more of a pantser than a plotter, I heard you say that in a reel I think you posted on Instagram or Facebook. Or somewhere, but I was really surprised to hear you say that because of because you marry so many elements together in your sort of like conclusions when you hit your final acts, and you there are so many like sort of like running things that you always tie up so beautifully that it really surprised me to hear that you don't know where you're ending things when you start on things because they feel so well like constructed your stories. And the again, you work with timelines a lot as well, like writing in past and present. So what do you do if you particularly in your, because Dark Heart and Kitty, I'm looking at them, like Kitty especially is a bit of a bigger, no, Dark Heart and Kitty are, they're two of your longest novels that I've seen. What do you do if you start hitting snags where you're not sure, like, if do you get stuck?
Yes, but um, never long enough to stop me. I mean, I've been writing a really long time. I think I've been writing for 20 years.
Mhm.
So at this point, if I have, writer's block, I just force myself through it. I remember writing one chapter in Kitty. I remember sitting there writing it and just thinking, I cannot do this, but I just forced the words out. And it must have taken me an hour to write a paragraph, but I mean, I just like literally forced it out and I just pushed through it. Um, the book I just finished recently that I'm editing now, same thing. Like I would just spend a week on a few pages, but I just push through and I'll think this sounds terrible, but whatever, I can always go back. And so if I get stuck, I just keep writing anyway, and I figure I can just smooth it out later. I don't know.
Yeah.
And if it sounds like nonsense on the page, that's not unfixable. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think that's generally good writing advice as well for any authors that might be listening because writer's block, I know some people that I've started forcing myself to just keep typing now if I get stuck. 'Cause I think eventually, if I just keep going, my brain will go, "Oh, I know, I know what to
Right.
do." Um, so yeah, I think as a writer myself, like I'm really impressed by your story construction because yeah, I do read a lot of books and a lot of them are review requests, and for that reason I read a lot of debuts, and editors are expensive and things, so like I read a lot of I feel like unproofed kind of works from people who are new. And so yeah, when I not that these stories are bad or anything, it's just I very rarely get books where like everything works for me and I'm like, oh, I wish I'd written that myself. What a
Right.
great idea. Um there was a question in there, but I started gushing about your work. Sorry, hang on. Let me try and recenter myself where I was. What were I talking about? Oh yeah, all of your different elements. So how do you redraft a lot, or like what's the process for you when you're putting a book together?
Well, I right now I'm trying to edit a book right now, and this one's being mean to me, but so I don't like to redraft. I hate redrafting. So as I'm writing, if I notice something I want to change, I tend to go back immediately and alter that.
Hmm.
And then when I get to the end, I'll go back and just read through once and then move
Mm.
on. Because I don't like to dwell. And I was just talking about this with a friend of mine who's, because I'm struggling right now with this current book, and he said, you know, you could just sit and like move on to something else, come back to it later. And I said, nope, I cannot do that. If I sit on this one, then I won't come back to it. Or when I
Yeah.
do, it'll be too far from my mind. I'll be on to something else. So I have to finish it now. I have to birth this child, and if the child comes out ugly, then that's what it is, okay? And I'm just I'll make a pretty one next time, you know. So I don't have too much shame in producing a book that isn't going to work for everybody. But now that I feel like people have, I mean, I feel like I've been self-publishing into a void for the
Mhm.
past for all my life, or for whatever, however long I've been doing this. And all of a sudden, some people have started reading, like, and giving feedback, and it's really strange to me because now I feel like I have to actually do better. And so the one I'm writing now, normally I wouldn't care if it was a piece of poop and whatever. I publish it and I just have it on my shelf. But now
Mhm.
I feel like, oh shoot, if people are going to read it, I don't want it to be bad. So I feel like there's a little pressure now. But you know, it is what it is. I'm not, you know, I don't hold any illusions of being some famous author. I'm just making books because I enjoy it. And so, you know, if the next one falls flat for you, if you choose to read it, oh well, it's just, it
Oh
is
no,
what it is. So
I'm 4 books in to your catalog, and I've really enjoyed all of them. And the when I started reading your work, so I read those 4 books in the same month. So it was The Women in the Woods, Hilltop House, Dark Heart, and Kitty. And that month I decided I'm going to read all of my review requests because they were hanging over my head. I had 63 pending review requests.
I don't know how you did that.
No, I don't. I'm never doing it again because it broke my
Oh,
brain for at least 30 days after. I just didn't want to read or look at anything, and I didn't want to talk to anyone.
I don't blame you.
So tired. It took me a while to pick another book up after that, but um yeah, so I don't know how I did that. Now I just dropped everything else in my life to read apart from work. And so I was so I'm not going to say it was like a chore because I was actually surprised with how many of the books I read that I really enjoyed. But yours were like that, they were a real highlight for me because you were an author I'd never read. So I like that. Like I love it when I find a new author that whose books I really look forward to. Like so now I'll be looking forward to your next book release, and I yes,
Dang it.
no, it's all good, it's all good.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
and so I read The Women in the Woods and Hilltop House, and then I saved the Dark Heart and Kitty for like the last week of my reading challenge because I just felt like, oh, even if I have a patch of books where I'm not enjoying reading too much, I've saved two that I feel like I'm guaranteed to like, which was the case. um,
Oh, thank you.
so yeah, I had a really fun time with them. But what I got from your books is is the feeling that you really enjoy telling stories because when I went to Goodreads and Amazon to review your books, I was, and I hope you don't mind me like bringing this up because I'm not saying this is a negative, but I
No,
just
it's
couldn't
fine.
I
I
couldn't
think I know.
yeah, I just couldn't believe that you didn't have more reviews on your work because I was flabbergasted because I was like, I read a lot, so and I review everything I read, and usually even with indie publishing, a lot of it is hard to get book reviews and hard to get traction in indie publishing because it's I think maybe indie publishing is a bit saturated because there are so many of us, but also I feel like there are enough readers for everyone. It's just that finding them is hard
Right.
when you're marketing everything by yourself. So so my thought was, even though it doesn't look like you've got a lot of traction on your work, you're still producing consistently a lot of work, which like that comes from a place of really loving what you actually do rather than trying to make money from something. And it shows in your work because yeah, you like could tell a lot of thoughts got into it. I can't believe that you don't redraft that much. I'm jealous because I could never turn out something like this without at least 3 drafts, I don't think.
A
They'd
lot
be
of drafting up here, you know. I don't
yeah.
necessarily write it down, but there's a lot in my head. So
Yeah, I haven't released a novel yet. I wrote one during the lockdown year of 2020
Ooh,
and Yes. And then when I went back and reread it, I was like, oh, there are plot holes galore. And I hadn't made notes because I really thought that I'd remember everything because, you know, it was
Right
coming
here.
from my brain.
Well, I can't write short stories. So to your
Mhm.
credit, I can't do what you do. So I can do poetry. I love poetry. That's my other thing. And then novels, but in between, I cannot do. So
It's Yeah, I'm more comfortable in short story form. I'm currently working on a novel, but that first really terrible one I wrote has taught me lessons about don't think that you're going to remember small details that you wrote 3 months ago.
well, right. That's why I can't like put this aside and come back. I won't have the mindset to be in it, I have to do it while I'm in it. So,
Yeah, it's novel writing is a much there's so much more going on to write a novel than I realized before I attempted it because short stories I find I tend to do the first draft in one sitting with a short story and it feels and then I'll spend a week just editing, redrafting or whatever I want, like tinkering around with it. So yeah, novel writing is a completely different discipline that I did not know it was as in not as involved, but yeah, there's so much more to think about with longer
yeah,
work.
it's just a different process. I think short stories are hard because they need to have some type of, I feel like what you're doing is it's like a novel, everything that you want in a novel, but condensed. You need the same feelings of excitement and completion, but they need to be condensed. And I don't know how to do that. I always want to just go on and on and on and on and on. So I commend what you do and other good short story writers. So
Oh, thank
hats off.
yeah, I'm picky when I'm reading short stories because I'm a very like character focused reader. So
Mhm.
short stories, a lot of the time, because they tend to be based more like they're more plot orientated because they're such a short space of time to tell a story. And if I can't latch onto a character, I'm like, I don't really care.
I love a good twist too, a good twist at the end, So that's always
Mhm.
important to me with a short story too. I like that anyway. So
Yes, I enjoy those.
I do.
Right. Nothing happened. Okay, so can I ask you about your I guess your influences, but what kind of stuff when you were a kid did you consider scary that might not necessarily have been horror?
Well, you're taking me back here. I'm getting so old. Stuff that I considered scary. Well, I grew up. Well, I have five sisters, so and I grew up in a very, very Christian, very conservative family. So I think I was very afraid of doing the wrong thing all the time, which is
Mhm.
probably where all of my shame horror comes. I
Yeah, that kind
fantasize
of
to
makes
myself a
sense.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, as we get older, we kind of reflect on our childhoods and like, where does my mindset come from? So there has been a lot of that going on. Um, there was that, yeah, the fear of doing the wrong thing, making the wrong move, getting in trouble with, not just my parents, but the guy above and all that. What else? When it comes to horror, the only movies I remember being scared of was Poltergeist. That franchise terrified me as a child.
Yeah, me too.
It still terrifies me, and I was, I showed it to my kids who were not scared at all. Anyway, um,
Yeah, the youth of today, they just don't I do not understand people who do not find The Exorcist scary.
ooh, okay, they have problems, but anyway, I was actually a really so when I think about my childhood. Okay, let me go back here properly. I was a really normal kid. I was an Air Force brat, so we traveled a lot. I never really had any super solid friendships, and of course, social media wasn't around. So like, I didn't have any friends, not really. But I was a fine, happy child. I don't remember having problems. I would play, do all the stuff. I loved animals. I'd pick bugs apart. I was out, collecting frogs and all that. And then I remember hitting middle school, which here, I was 13, 14, and I was super mean girl. So
Mm.
my book Kitty comes from a place of, you know, um, a personal place. And then after that, I became afraid of everything and everybody. So once I hit my teen years, like 15, 16, 17, I became very inward. I turned inward. I didn't communicate well with anybody, male, female, anybody. And I think that's where a lot of my writing really blossomed was because I didn't have any outlet. I
Mhm.
mean, when I was a teenager, I didn't go to any dances. I didn't do anything social. I sat in my room. I wrote in journals, which I have since thrown away because who wants to go read those? Anyway, so, looking back, I know that my love of writing, I think it really started more as just an outlet for me
Mhm.
because I didn't know how to communicate with people. And I felt like I had a lot to say. I just didn't know who to say it to.
Mhm.
I don't feel like a lot of I love my family, but I don't feel like the interest was really there.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, so it just kind of started that way, and then kept going from there. So that sounds like a sad childhood. I was a happy child, but
No, that's a lot of that's familiar to me as well. I was very uncomfortable at school because I really didn't fit in, and like sometimes be like, oh well, you probably just felt like you didn't. I'm like, oh no, let me assure you, I was weird in like everyone thought I was strange in school, and I did have a couple of close friends, but mostly I did get horrifically bullied, so it made me afraid of
um,
like groups of women. It's only in recent years where I've got over that, and I'm like, oh, women aren't the enemy. It was just that one group of one
still
group of
feel that
girls.
though. As an adult, like I teach, right? I teach at a high school, and it's kind of weird. There's got to be something psychological here, but that my teenage years were my absolute worst, and yet I'm a high school teacher. Like I'm around teenagers all the time, and also teenagers are in every one of my books. So
Mhm.
I'm constantly talking about adolescence in my books, which there has to be something going on here. But I'm not going to analyze myself too much. But obviously, I love that time period just
Mhm.
for its sake of how formative it is and how it shapes us as human beings,
Mhm.
um, for better or worse. But even now, I'll see groups of my fellow teachers, and I'll think, I don't know how to go talk to those people. I don't know how to talk to them. Give me a group of teenagers, and I can talk. I can get the slang going.
Mhm.
I can talk about the fits and the gyats and whatever. Give me their slang. I can do it. I'll sound like an idiot. They'll just laugh at me. Like I don't, but I am still intimidated by groups of adults, particularly groups of women. They're scary. We're scary.
Yeah, I think if you go through those sort of formative years where groups of girls like just equals you feeling singled out and like you don't fit in and they're going to be mean to you, it does follow you into your adulthood, and
Yeah.
it's a strange one. I don't want to go too deep into your religious upbringing. Well, I say religious upbringing, but that's always fascinating to me if I get to speak to
Mhm.
someone that's from the US, because in the UK there really isn't, that's not a component, typically speaking. So we of course we have churches here and things like that, and Christmas concerts and things, but as a general rule, I don't know a single person that goes to church.
Mhm.
It's just like not like not normal, but it's not the average thing that you see in the UK anyway. Maybe more in Ireland. I think Ireland might be a little bit more religious than the rest, but that's depending on where you are in Ireland. That's not the UK anyway, really. But yeah, it's so um I have read the Bible though, because I was curious, and my thought when I was reading it was that if you're a believer, this is really scary. And that's how my brain processed it, because of from someone that's just coming from a standpoint of I don't believe in anything at all. Um, I'm very boring that way. Um, yeah, like it's just like the stories, and especially the more wrathful things. I thought, wow, if you're raised um believing these stories, and this is your worldview and your outlook, then like those I'm sorry, I think I've hang on.
Me or you? I don't, it could be me. I don't know. It might be me, but
It's definitely me because I forgot to turn one of my screens off. Sorry about that.
shame.
Um yeah, shame. So yeah, but that was what struck me, is that the idea that there's an all-powerful being that knows everything you're thinking, as well as as well as seeing everything you're doing. And I did think you must feel like an extra layer of shame or guilt or anything if you think you've done or said anything wrong, because even if your parents don't know about it, God does. And
Mhm.
I thought that's like an extra layer of something that I didn't grow up with. So I always find it fascinating when I get to talk to writers that are from outside of the UK that have got more religious backgrounds than me. Um, Obviously, there's lots of really nice things as well that come with religion, like, but
Right. Right.
yeah, it's
I envy that in you. And I don't think I'll ever be done sifting through, what I believe as a human being. I think, so much of our lives is just trying to determine why we believe what we believe. Is it because I was raised to believe it? Is it because it was right? What parts of it do I retain? What parts of it do I allow too much control over me? Like, I'm always going to be sifting through that, and it's a process, and it's horrible, and I hate it. But I've just been in the throes of that for a while, and I do think a lot of my horror comes from me working through a lot of my own feelings about faith and
Mhm.
life in general. Even though I wouldn't say my books are like about religion, they're not.
No,
Not
they don't feel
you
that
know,
way, but
no,
that like that shame kind of stuff
yeah.
I have like read into it, and also your teenage characters I do find I do find them very relatable. Um
Oh, good.
because I was like, oh, this is taking me back. Yeah, it's there's just so much that goes into, I guess, informing the kind of like subconsciously what you're writing into a story as well as what you're actually thinking about. I had a reviewer once that read a couple of my shorts say that there was a common theme of self-hatred, and I was like, oh no, I didn't mean to put that in there.
Somehow it just gets in there.
It's like
Well,
maybe I need therapy. Shit.
maybe we all do. But writing
Yeah.
is kind of a form of therapy, right? In a way. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. Um, I yeah, I don't know. I had a thought and then I forgot it, but
Oh, I'm sorry. It's because I talk
something
too
about the
much.
religion thing, and then I forgot what it was. Oh, the being raised to think,
Mhm.
and I don't know for me that it was so much the idea that like God sees everything. I think
Mhm.
it's more, that your decisions in life can lead you, like there's a definite right and a definite wrong, and you could go to hell. Like, you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that overarching, your decisions could have this lasting impact on you, and you don't even necessarily know it. Like the things that you're doing right now, the conversation I'm having right now, it could be sinful, and I could be, in trouble for this, and I don't even
Yeah.
know it. Like that whole, I don't know what's right or wrong, and oh my gosh, that it just, growing up with that weight on you as a child and as a young person, and having this constant feeling of what if I'm doing something wrong and I don't know if it's wrong, and oh my gosh,
Mhm.
it's huge. And I don't blame my parents. I don't blame anybody in particular, but it's a lot to put on a young person. And so I
Yeah.
think I don't know. I think about it a lot now.
Yeah.
So
Well, adolescence is already and childhood. I mean, I would not go back. I know people say, "Oh, these are like the easiest, best years of your life." And I'm like,
no,
"Are you kidding? Did you have the same teenage years as me, where I
no.
just you constantly feel like you're screaming into the void, you have no real control over anything, and you don't know what's happening at any given point." Well, that would be anyway as a teenager.
Yeah,
Um, so I don't have children of my own, but I do babysit for friends and family and things. And I used to work as a kids entertainer, so I spent a lot of time around young children. And one thing I learned is to never, ever, ever laugh at a child when they're crying over something that seems stupid to you as an adult, because like that could be the worst thing that's ever happened to them in the
yeah,
moment. You know what I mean? And I think people forget how hard it is to be a small child and be really upset about something, and then the adult closest to you goes, "How
yeah.
funny."
Well, the same thing with the teenagers that I teach, and I love teaching teenagers. I truly have so much passion for my job. I mean, I don't like all the nuts and bolts of it and the administration aspect, but
Mhm.
I love teenagers. I really do. And just being around them and reminding them that this is this big of your life and there's so much more, and you're
Mhm.
fine getting a C in English or whatever, the equivalent is, like in the UK.
Mhm.
It's fine. You're going to be fine. Like this is a very small part of your life, and your problems, they feel very big, but it's going to be okay. And just I really love working with them, which is again kind of ironic because my adolescence was horrible.
Well,
Was horrible, but I didn't like it.
maybe that's why, because you're a compassionate person, and you know, maybe you make life a little bit easier for the people you teach. So, um,
One can hope.
yes, yeah. And I always thought that there were only two types of teachers when I was a teenager, and they were the very few that didn't seem to hate teenagers, and then all of the rest of them. So, in
Well,
my
you could
school,
still be
anyway.
right about that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had but funnily enough, I loved every English teacher that I had. And I don't know if maybe that's because I like reading and I'm creatively minded, so I was already, you know,
You're drawn to the subject, so yeah, that
yeah.
could be why. But also English teachers are the best. So
Yes, there's also that. I was gonna say, yeah, they always have like good taste in books they can recommend you and
of
everything.
course,
And I think there's a something to be said for people who read maybe with the level of empathy, because if you are reading other people's experiences a lot, maybe that helps in your real
yeah,
life when you're dealing with people. So
yeah, there is something to that. Yeah, that reading helps produce empathy in the reader. Yeah, for sure. So
my I was talking to my husband before about book and writing conventions, and that I have a lot of like male friends in because the 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 ratio of like men to everybody else in writing conventions, there's always a lot of men. And I said, you know, that like the kind of men that I'm friends with in my writing circles are like quite sensitive people. And he was like, well,
mhm.
maybe that's because they're writers. And so they're writing from like female perspectives and they're writing from, and I was like, oh, I'd never thought about that, but that's, yeah, maybe there's something to be said for that, putting yourself in other people's heads and shoes all the time. So,
Yeah, I don't know.
do you have
But
any, sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you have any topics or subject matter that you wouldn't write about?
You not not that I can think of. I used to say I couldn't write anything about or I couldn't read anything about children being harmed, but
Hmm.
that kind of went out the window. There's stuff in my books about children being harmed. Now I don't ever want to go the route of really graphic violence. I
Mhm.
don't I there's definitely, murder and rape and nasty stuff in my books, but I believe I treat it with nuance and respect. I'm never going to go really graphic. And I know I made a video somewhere about trigger warnings. I won't put trigger warnings in my books. I know that there's a bunch of, debate as to whether we should or shouldn't, but I do feel like I treat those subjects with enough respect that it's not going to trigger somebody. I don't know, but I don't know. That's a whole other topic we could save for a different video. But um, again, there's no subject that's off limits for me, but there is, I guess, I won't treat anything really graphically, horrifically in a way that would make somebody feel incredibly disturbed. You know what I'm saying? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that the way that you depict your harsher subject matter, shall we say, I
Mhm.
do feel like you approach it with sincerity and um usually as well, you know, you lead into things, so it's not like you turn the page and all of a sudden something out of left field is happening like in that regard. I don't have any specific sort of trigger warning like triggers myself, but I have closed books before if say it's you know we're dealing with like essay or something and then it's just been handled in a way that's really disrespectful or
Right,
unrealistic. That kind of thing just makes me go, ugh, like I don't want to read that because it's no real human would ever behave like this.
right,
Or
right.
you know, that's kind of what puts me off, even though I do wince a bit at, you know, some things I suppose, but if it's been written with honesty and empathy, yeah, I can still like enjoy the story with it and everything.
Sure.
Um, do you have anything that you specifically avoid watching in movies yourself?
Not, not really. Again, I used to say really horrible violence towards children, only
Mhm.
because I have a few, but but I watch all kinds of stuff,
Mhm.
I don't know. We watch a lot of true, crime dramas and all kinds of stuff, my husband and I. So no, I guess nothing's off limits really. I don't necessarily want to be kept up at night because I don't get enough sleep as it is.
Yeah.
But um, I'm trying to think if there's any show that I thought, nope, not watching that one. I'm sure there's some, but I can't think off the top of my head. you know, so if something comes to me, I'll mention it. But
Alrighty, cool.
sorry, you caught me off guard on that one. So.
I'm sorry. This is just a random like stream of consciousness in my head. This is how
Yeah.
it comes out. Do you have favorite in any sort of literature? Do you have favorite subgenres or like or in horror like kinds of monsters or folk or I don't know. Yeah, do you have anything that you're particularly drawn to that you really enjoy exploring?
Well, I know what I don't really like, I suppose. Which is not exactly what you asked. So I'm really not into like super dystopian stuff unless it's
Mhm.
kind of different.
Okay.
Um, like people are always shocked that I haven't read The Hunger Games, which maybe I should read it, but I think I got kind of we used to teach a ton of dystopian stuff like 1984, Brave New World, all those classic dystopians. And so I kind of got put off on dystopian stuff unless there's some twist. Zombies, I'm kind of not into zombies. I don't know. Sexy vampires, I'm not really into. And then werewolves, I don't know. I love the show Supernatural until they do like all the
Me too.
demon angel stuff too. I'm not really into the demon angel stuff either. That excludes a whole lot. I guess I like there has to be something kind of different about it, I guess. I don't know. Stuff that I do like, I really do like folk horror. In fact, I'd love to do more of it.
Mhm.
But I live in the United States. There is not enough folk here. Okay, you guys go way back. There's tons of folk stuff going on over there. There is folky stuff in the United States, but you have to really look for it. I wanted to do something like there's this legend of the Dark Watchers out in the Sierra Nevadas. I was going to do something with those in my most recent book, Sublime Messages,
Mhm.
but then that went out the window. And then somebody was writing something about black-eyed children, and I thought maybe I'll do something with that. Just
Mhm.
urban legend kind of stuff. So urban legends interest me. I like to look
Mhm.
into those, folk horror. And I do like cosmic horror. I like the idea that there's greater elements at play in the universe, and we think we know what's going on, but we really have no clue, you know. And I kind of like that idea too. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in the works of yours I read so far, they're very like human horror stories, but with a little extra something, like a little extra weird element that really amplifies the human experience, which I enjoy. Yeah, the I suppose zombies wouldn't be your thing if you don't like dystopian because they're basically almost all kind of
Yeah.
dystopian stories if you think about it. And I suppose if you're teaching that kind of thing, it's going to get old after a while because I'd imagine you teach the same books on the syllabus over and
For
over.
the most
So
part, yeah.
yeah, probably ruins some of them for you after a while of going over
Yeah,
and over.
there's good and bad to it. You get really good at it, so you know what you're doing. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
um,
I'm yet to meet anyone with an interest in horror that doesn't like the show Supernatural, regardless of what people think about the writing of it. After a certain point, everyone is it's that show is special, I think, because
oh yeah, you gotta love Dean and Sam. Yep.
I went to a Comic Con last year with Jensen Ackles was there, which is the only reason I went. And and the I used to go to a lot of Walking Dead conventions and stuff, and I've never seen anything like the queue for Jensen Ackles, where people were pulling out mirrors, redoing their makeup. There were
Oh gosh.
people practically hyperventilating as they were like getting closer and closer. And I was like, okay, this is definitely the most excited queue of people I've ever been in because um yeah, that was like mania. And I thought that I was pretty cool until I rounded the corner and saw him. And then I was like,
That's
oh
how I
no,
would be too. I'm like, I wouldn't get like that. Oh yes, I would probably.
I just went mute. I thought I was going to be like, oh, hi, did it? I was like, it's Jensen Ackles. So, and
Take
I
that
don't,
picture.
I like to tell people that I don't have celebrity crushes, but you know, he's way more handsome in real life as well, if you could believe that.
Really? Because he's pretty handsome.
I came home and said to my husband, I'm really sorry, have to leave you because if you'd seen this guy, you'd understand.
He probably, yeah, he probably would understand. Say, oh, yep,
Yep.
all right.
Um,
Go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, fandom
Um,
fandom in horror is something that I find interesting because I know in the I'm very jealous of anyone who lives in the USA, because your book and writing conventions are way bigger than ours.
I need to go. I've never been to one.
Oh, you'd love them.
I'm so bad at the promotion aspect. I don't know how to do it. I really don't. I mean, besides my little videos that I put out, this is why I don't sell books, because I don't know how to do it and I don't have time. So you see, I
Well,
have no reads. It's because I don't know how to do this.
the marketing side of indie publishing is very savage, I think. It's
Yeah.
you know, you have a full-time job plus you're writing novels on top of that. It's very time consuming, and you have a family as well.
Mhm.
So that's got to be a lot of time. I don't I have a husband, no children, and I still never have time for anything. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, and the marketing side can be extremely time consuming, as I'm sure you've discovered when you're sending out review requests and things. It takes a long time to find people to request, let alone actually requesting things. So it's yeah, that it feels like at least a part-time job in itself, the marketing
Right.
side.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
just don't do it. Like, I just literally don't do it. I don't do any marketing. I don't have ARC readers. I don't have beta read. I don't do any of it. I just don't. I know that sounds crazy, but I just figured, if magic is meant to happen, it'll happen. And if not, I'm just, like you said, I'm just happy writing. Truly, I just am happy telling stories and putting them on my bookshelf. And actually, about 20 years ago, I did actually get a book picked up for publishing, and it fell through. And I felt like ever since then, I felt like that was my chance and I missed it. And oh,
no,
but I'm gonna keep writing.
no,
So it's just, I don't know.
no, there are many chances. It's a well, if you don't have time to market yourself, that's why you need overly enthusiastic reviewers to
Well,
read your
thank you.
books
I
to market
appreciate this.
for you. I find I have found as a writer conventions very useful just for meeting other authors, and I have found that in general the author community is very willing and ready to like prop everyone else up with them.
Right.
Because I do find other authors are the most supportive vocal readers. So yeah, that's I suppose there's something to be said. But yeah, if ever you can make it to like a Stoker Con or something like that, I think you'd have a blast. Because
I think so too. And I will agree with you that so I have met probably the best thing about finally putting myself out, like
mhm,
promoting, trying to promote, putting my books out and all that. The best thing that's come of it is just meeting other writers and other people. Truly, I have met some really good friends now and people that I've read their work, I've communicated with them. I've met a couple people that I'm pretty close to now. Just we talk
mhm.
about writing a lot, and just I never had writer friends before this. So that's really been the biggest benefit, truly. So yeah, meeting other people. I do. So
It's like, well, this is why I like doing these author interviews, because my favorite thing outside of reading books and writing stories is just talking about reading books and writing stories. So, um, that's what I, do with all of my spare time pretty much. And yeah, I'm really grateful to that you agreed to do this, because I've been so excited about your writing since that first book I read, and I don't emphatically talk about every book the way I have about The Women in the Woods. It's that's a really special one for me. And yeah, I love picking the brain of any author I can. You're way better than me at like setup and payoff, especially. I have a problem with that because I am also a pantser, but I never know where I'm going with anything. So I
but
think
until about 2/3 through. So and then I'm like, oh,
yeah,
but
I've usually the 40,000 word mark is where I completely lose my way, and I'm like, well, I'm sure I had an idea, but I don't know what to do with this now. And yeah, so I have several files on my laptop that are about half finished, and I'm like, I have no idea. So yeah, there's always like lots to learn from when you find yeah, cool new books to love. What did you say? Did you say Sublime Messages was your most recent? Because I haven't read that one yet, but I have it.
yeah. Yeah, so I published that one in February of
Mhm.
24, I suppose. And then my book Strings is the one it will come out in August. I don't know if it'll be any good. You know how you get so into something that you can't figure out if it's good anymore? And that's how I feel right now. So it could be terrible, but it's going to come out in August, whether it's terrible or not. And then I will move on. So
Be sure to send it to me for a review, of course. When
Just
Let me
send it
know.
to you don't have to even review it. I'll just send it to you because you've done so much for me. So I can just send it to you for just for you.
Oh, well, thank you, but
You don't
I
have to
will
do any work.
definitely review it. Sorry, this is I had a train of thought for this, but it's gonna sound like a random question now. Do you listen to music or have any background noise when you read? Write, sorry.
um, yeah, usually I need, well, it's more to drown out the background noise. I have a pretty busy house. So yes, I'm always listening to music. It varies depending on what I'm writing.
Mhm.
Usually it's not music with words, so it's not usually popular music. It's like I just go on YouTube, and one of my favorites is just like, gonna sound so weird, but Stranger Things synth music.
Mhm.
Like, I love all the synth music that's been kind of created around Stranger Things. It's kind of creepy, but also kind of ethereal. I listen to a lot of that. Depending on what I'm writing. I've been doing a lot of circus music for my current book, and
Mhm.
I just have playlists I create. Yeah, so
I
you
do
know.
that. I also can't listen to music with lyrics if I'm writing because I'll start just typing the lyrics. So
Mhm.
it's too
Yeah,
distracting.
it's too much like feed in my brain or something. Yeah.
You're the first person that said that you listen to music to drown out the background noise, though. That's yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Do you have like a writing routine per se, or do you just do it when you have time?
It's just when I have time. Especially, well, I'm on summer vacation right now, so that's been nice. I just leisurely get up and write for maybe an hour in the morning,
Mhm.
whatever. Once I go back to work, it's really just 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Oh, I'm supposed to be on my lunch break at school, but I'm writing instead. I just get my lunch. Like, oh, I should be grading papers. I'm gonna write for 15 minutes. It's I can't have a routine. It's
Mhm.
just scatter writing. So, and somehow it comes together. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to imagine when you have time when it's it during the school year because you obviously you're at work all day 5 days a week and then I
But I'm not always working, so
well,
don't tell.
you're in the good company of a few of my favorite authors are also English teachers or they were English teachers. I know Stephen King taught and Paul Tremblay is one of my favorites, and I know that he teaches. I think he teaches English, but
Oh,
yeah, I'm always so in awe of how people have the time and the dedication, or carve out the time and have the dedication to do that on top of work. I work from home, so it's a bit easier for me because I don't have to factor in travel and physically being tired at the end of the day, like anyone with a job where they, are on their feet because I'm always at my desk or in chairs. So,
I
um,
actually find it harder though to be at home because when I'm at home, I find so many other things to do. Oh, I should do that laundry. Oh, I should do this or that. Like I distract myself. When I'm at
yeah,
work, I say I should grade papers, but that's boring. I'm going to do this instead.
yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think I could make a schedule if I tried. I'm not a scheduled person. It would,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I've tried and I can't do it. It just makes me feel stressed if I can't commit to the
right.
time if something happens. So, okay, I have two last questions. Um, firstly, and most importantly, what did you say? What's your new book coming out in August called?
It's called Strings,
String.
and I just say it's coming out in August. It could be August 1st or August 31st. It gives me some
Okay.
leeway.
Well, for anyone watching this video, I'll keep you guys posted. Let everybody know. And this is the last question, and it's become sort of a running joke on Have You Got Horror Interviews. Do
Okay.
you know what this is?
Should I? No, I
No.
don't.
Um, I whipped it out as a joke in the second ever interview I did, and it's become a thing now because nobody knows where it is.
What? Because I never made. I guess I haven't watched the end of one of your interviews. Now I feel bad.
Oh
I
no,
should have
no, no,
watched
it's
the
good.
last bit of one of your interviews.
No, you are like the 10th person in a row to look very perplexed by this.
Okay.
I've stuck with it because I'm offering a prize to people in the comments that might know. But I will when we stop recording, I'll tell you what it is, and then you'll be in the know, but you have to keep it a secret.
Okay. I'll do
Okay,
that.
cool. I know my friend Eric that watches all these videos he's dying to know. He's like, this is another interview where no one knew. Well,
I feel like it's gonna annoy the heck out of me when I hear it. Um,
no, you trust me, you won't have heard of it.
I would have known it. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
there was one author that said he thinks that I've imagined it into existence.
Well, it exists. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, cool. So we will round off there. Everybody keep an eye out for the newest book that will come out sometime in August called Strings. I will put links for Sarah's books in the description and socials and things like that. So be sure to follow her and definitely pick up some books if you haven't read anything by this fabulous author who is now one of my very favorites. And we will see you in the next author interview. So bleed, and this is the moment where I can't find the stop recording button. And we'll just awkwardly stop recording here.